Welcome to the Ask Chris Real Estate Podcast with Chris Phillips from Keller Williams. A successful 20-year veteran in the Middle Tennessee real estate market with over 100 5-star reviews, Chris is known for his knowledge and integrity. Whether you're buying, selling, investing, or just curious, his insight will guide you along the way.
New year, new home, a simple roadmap to buying in 2026. Welcome back to the podcast. If you're buying a home in the New Year's resolution, this episode is for you. Today, we're breaking down the simple, stress-free roadmap to buying a home in 2026. No hype, no confusion, just clear steps. And today, I'm joined again with Dr. David Manier with Premise Mortgage.
Unofficial doctor, not officially a doctor.
That's right. All right. So, David, thanks for coming back in today. I really appreciate that. So let's dive into what a New Year's resolution would be if we had a buyer who's looking to it. And I'm pretty excited about 2026. A lot of things are finally breaking loose for us.
Yeah.
And we're expecting to have a good year. And this is going to get a lot of people who have been on the sidelines and haven't been able to buy a home. They're going to get them back in the game. So we're going to help them by getting them started off on the right foot. So if they do this in January, and this is the time to do it, right, David?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. So why most home buyers get stuck? What are some reasons why most home buyers get stuck?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of home buyers think that they'll get stuck because they don't have perfect credit. They don't think that they have enough income. Whatever the issue may be that comes up. The main reason that I think people get stuck and end up not buying homes is just because they're not starting early enough. They're not going ahead and prepping and doing the things that they need to on the front end, right? So I think that's where it comes down to is we need to do some prep work on the front end so that you're confident and ready for whenever you're ready to pull that trigger on the home that you want to buy.
Okay, so most buyers don't fail because of credit. They just fail because they just don't start.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Okay. So our resolution number one, get financing financially clear, which means what?
Yeah, so getting financially clear doesn't mean you need a perfect credit score. Again, doesn't mean that you need the perfect income. So, income stability is a huge thing. So we'll definitely look at that. We're going to look at what are your monthly obligations, right? How much debt do you have, right? Do you have credit cards? Like, are you thinking about getting a new truck loan, right? Those are the things that are going to come into play that we need to figure out before you're ready to actually start buying a home. So.
Okay. So, and another thing that'll play into that is their income, right? What are they a dual income family? Do they have a lot of overtime? Do they have a lot of commission?
Yeah. So these are definitely things that we got to think about, right? So if you're getting overtime commission, sometimes we'll need 2 years of that employment so that we can figure out how much that you have to count that as qualifying income.
So what are some things that you do when you meet with a buyer who's looking to buy a house, and what do you ask for first, other than them filling out an application?
Right. So it kind of goes hand in hand with the application. So I just had a conversation with a guy just yesterday. He was asking, where do I start? Right? I'm wanting to buy a home. What do I need to do first? Right. So obviously the first thing is let's get an application, right? We can either do that. We have awesome technology to just, send a text and you can fill it out online. We always come in and meet in person. We can do a phone application, whatever's easier. So once I get the application, information that I'll need, do a soft credit pull, and then I'll also work on getting, income docs, bank statements, those type of things, right? Figuring out, are you a W-2 employee? Do you get paid hourly? Are you salary? Are you 1099? Is all your work, are you freelance? What does that look like? So I got to figure out what the big picture is for your income and your entire situation so that I can then match the best loan program with you so that I can get you into a home.
Okay. And then the pre-approval step, once we do that, not all pre-qualifications are pre-approvals. That means they need to be reviewed. We talked about assets and income. We talked about credit score. Some other things they can take into consideration is builders take you more seriously. A seller's going to take you more seriously if you've already been pre-qualified. I know me as a listing agent, I won't even entertain an offer from a buyer who has not been pre-qualified and pre-approved. So those are important things to do, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. So we're getting way ahead of ourselves. So let's slow it back down. They're financially clear. What's going to happen next? After we get them financially clear, then we need to talk to me about their budget, right? Now, and let's just use nice even round numbers. Let's say they're $400,000 house, but they don't feel comfortable buying a $400,000 house, even though you've approved them for a $400,000 house.
Right.
They want to buy a $350,000 house because they want to keep their payment a certain way.
Yeah.
I put that into the MLS. I start sending them emails of houses that are listed at $350 and down. Okay, they see what they can get for $350 and they're not happy with that, and they ask me to bump it up to $370. Okay, we've already approved them for $400, but then guess what happens? The interest rates go down a little. So that means they get more buying power, right?
Yeah, so that's a big thing. And another thing that you can also work on is getting seller concessions as well.
Yes.
So one thing that we'll see, kind of going back to your interest rate thing, a lot of times interest rates will go down, they'll go up. Sometimes it fluctuates, which right now, I don't know if you know this, we're actually at 3-year lows right now for interest rates. So top tier conventional, I mean, it's right there at 6%. FHAs, those are like 5.75 right now as far as interest rates. So we're seeing rates in 5s. So, if you started trying to buy a home in the last year or so and, maybe interest rates were too high, they've started coming down. So I'd say that goes back to the whole planning thing, right? We plan, figure out, okay, maybe now's not the right time. Maybe we need interest rates to come down a little bit. Well, now interest rates have come down some, so maybe it's time to revisit this.
And then in the meantime, they can get their debts lower. They can become more qualified as a buyer.
Yeah.
But kind of like going back to what we were talking about, build the right team, which means you need the right agent that is going to work with that lender so that they know what they need to do to get you that house. And that's one of the things that David is real good with me about. He tells me how much concessions he needs from the seller. And he says, I definitely need this much, but if you could get this much, it would be beneficial.
Yeah.
And then we talk about those scenarios. And then I go back and educate the buyer and tell them, all right, here is your scenarios. Here's what it would look like. Let's go shopping so you can kind of see what's going on.
Yeah.
So with this, you're working together. Your agent and your lender should be aligned from day one. This helps with pricing strategy, building incentives, and contract terms. It also protects you from any surprises, which is what I value myself. No surprises while we're doing what we're doing.
Right, exactly. That's huge. And, that goes back to the whole, pre-qualification on the front end. Right. So whenever I'm talking with somebody trying to figure out how much they qualify for, I get all the documents on the front end so that we know what we're working with. Right. If I'm talking to somebody and then you put on your application that you make $10 million a month, I'm like, okay, that's cool. That's what you put on the application. I'm like, now show me some documentation to back it up.
Yep. Because
whenever the underwriter is going to review the file, they're going to say, hey, where's the documentation to prove, what you put on the application? So we love to have all that stuff on the front end so that we have as few hiccups as possible as we move forward through this transaction.
So you get pre-approved in January and February. We're going to move and we're going to start buying in either May, June, or July, right? So we might have to come back and ask for some updated docs when we get closer to that timeline. But they're looking at the market. And as houses come on the market in the inventory from February until May, inventory is going to increase, which they're going to see more. They're going to have more options, and then they're going to know what they can get for a $375,000 home.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So budget beyond price. So don't take on any new debt. Don't change jobs. Don't move large sums of money. These are some things that we've experienced before.
Those are some big things. One of the main things I'll tell people, I'm like, listen, do not go out to Ashley Home Furniture and buy a whole new living room set because, you want it all furnished before you move in.
Right.
That's a terrible idea and could screw the whole deal up. So definitely tell my people, don't go out and get a bunch of new debts with stuff. I'm like, we know what we're working with here. Don't go out and get anything until after we close on the home.
All right. So 30, 60 days out. We're going to get pre-approved. We're going to review our finances and we're going to define our goals. All right. The next 60 days, we're going to start touring homes. And then we're going to refine our strategy and kind of look with that. So what does that look like when we refine our strategy? So you're going to tell me the 5 must-haves. So you say, I got to have a 2-car garage. I got to have a 3-bedroom with a 2-bath. It needs to be in this school zone, and I want an open floor plan. Well, we start going and looking at houses. And one of those things comes up and you find the house you love, but it's not in the school zone you want, but it's another school zone that you're okay with. So that might refine that that category, we might be okay with it. And we discuss it.
Yeah, I'll tell you another thing that can also kind of change that is whenever we start looking at how much purchase price will affect what your payment's going to look like.
Yeah.
You might say I have to live in this school zone, but every house that's in that school zone is about $50,000 over where you're wanting to be for your budget. So that sometimes will bring people back down to reality, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing I tell people is we'll go ahead and get pre-qualified. I'll talk about what your payment would look like on say a $400,000 home, right? But then I'll also tell people things change, right? So there's property taxes, insurance, if there's a homeowners association, those are all things that can affect what your monthly payment's going to look like. So what I'll tell my people is if you find a home that you really like, send it to me and then I'll put all the numbers into my scenario so I can let you know, hey, here's what your payment's looking like on this. So you can kind of customize what your payment looks like depending on which house that you like.
And one of the things that I love doing that is kind of a little secret sauce for me personally is if I've got a buyer that's got a tight budget and, we're looking inside the city limits, but we go right outside the city limits, they're not paying city and county taxes all of a sudden.
Right.
They're just paying county taxes. That's going to reduce their payment, that extra $100 a month that they're worried about.
Yep.
And they're going to be able to buy more house. And sometimes we discuss those things. So like the 5 must-haves, we're like, okay, you've looked at all the houses. None of these fit your criteria. We need to refocus on what's going to be something we're going to have to let go and something we can get. And here's some other ideals since we've walked through these houses with you. So, we're doing this and we're looking at all those things. And let's say we get under contract. So now we've got under contract. We've got the price that they want, they feel comfortable with. We've got them some seller concessions. We've got them, let's say, for a $400,000 house, we got them $12,000 in concessions. That's going to take care of all their closing costs.
Nice.
And what else?
Yeah, so it goes towards their closing costs, right? And if there's any extra that we have, we can put it towards buying the interest rate down some.
Okay.
So
all right, and that varies from day to day.
Right. Yeah. And so a lot to go into, which we'll make a separate video on that sometime. But yeah, so some programs, it could be, spend $500 and it could lower your payment $30 a month. Some programs it could be, spend $2,000 and it could bring it down, $300 a month. It all depends on your loan amount, on the loan program. There's a lot that goes into it. But yeah, all in all, if you wanted to spend some money to lower your interest rate, it's always an option.
Well, and another thing that I do that I try to save my buyers money is not to close on the last day of the month like every other realtor. I close 4 or 5 days before the end of the month. So we're not in that big herd of people where mistakes can be made because you've got a lot of people closing on the same day, whether it's title, whether it's lenders, whether it's real estate agents. Everybody's not scrambling and we're not up against the clock because what happens if it's the 31st of the month, we don't close on that day, the next day we've got to redo what?
So it can change a lot of things, right? Obviously, having to make sure that you're still good with the sellers so that if we have to extend. But another thing that goes into it is your daily interest payment that you have. So that's a part of your closing cost. And so whenever you're closing at the end of the month, you're not going to have as much that you're going to pay on that, right? So what we're going to be looking at is, how many days are there between when you close and through the end of the month, right? Because obviously, whenever you are closing on your home, you're not going to have a mortgage payment that month, right? Because you just bought the house. You're going to skip that next month's payment, right? So if you're closing in March, there's not going to be a March payment. You skip April, so your first payment would be due in May. So what that daily interest payment is, that's a part of your closing costs, is for the month of March, for the days from whenever you close to the end of the month, there's a little bit that you're going to pay there. So it's kind of like a partial mortgage payment almost. That's just going to be the interest part of your payment. And so the later that you close in the month, the less that's going to be, right? So if you're closing like the last day of the month, you might only end up paying, $30 for that, right? But I mean, if you're closing, at the first of the month, that could make it, $2,000 added to your closing costs.
So if we're closing on the 27th, that's 4 days. So that's like $120, $150, well worth the money to not be in with everybody else and have the peace of mind of closing. I like to close on Thursdays too. One of the reasons I like that is because sometimes we don't close on the day we're supposed to. So we've got one extra day to get it closed up before the weekend, and then that way they can still move over the weekend like they planned originally. And that's a big deal to me. I want to make sure that first, especially the first time you buy a home, goes smoothly. So closing on a Thursday, not closing on the 31st of the month. Those are key things that I do as a real estate agent. And I ask, obviously, the buyers, are you okay with closing on these days? And what's your schedule? Is your work? Do you plan off being off on this weekend? What do you do? Sometimes they might work the weekend, so they want off on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So it all depends.
Yep.
Just we curb it or create that when we're writing the offer so that we know every part of that.
Yeah.
So now we get to the closing table. We're ready to sign the paperwork. How long should we put aside for having to close at the title company?
Yeah, so depending on what type of loan program it is, like THCA down payment assistance stuff, those can usually take about double the time because they're thick packets. Usually 30 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have any more than that.
I always tell them 45 minutes to an hour. That way they can do the things, review them. The title company is going to get them the paperwork beforehand, at least most of it, so they can review it.
Yeah.
So when they go in, they're seeing the same documents. They know what they're going to bring into the table.
Yep.
We've already got the earnest money there. We make sure it funds, and then we're off to the races.
One question I get asked a lot is, I was told I have to bring, $10,000 to the closing table, right? That might be what you end up having to bring, right? So what do? Like, do you just walk up to the title company with $10,000 in cash and say, here's the money that I owe to buy the property? Like, no, realistically, that's not what's happening, right? So what we'll do, we try to have the numbers at least 3 days out before your closing, so you know exactly how much that you're going to be having to pay. So once we know that exact number, let's just say it's $10,000 that you're going to have to pay, what you'll do is you'll talk to your bank and say, I need to set up a wire to this title company. So we'll give you the title instructions, and a lot of times the title company will have you call them to verify, so that we don't run into some wire fraud. That's a big thing in the real estate industry right now.
Big thing is wire fraud right now.
Yep. So title companies will have you call them to verify that the account number, everything is correct, and so that usually the day before closing, you'll call your bank and get the wire set up so that it can be there.
One more thing before we close. Most buyers want to try to time the market because their parents are in their ear, or their best friends already bought a house, or somebody they know has already done this process, and they're like, oh, you need to buy at this time.
Yeah.
Should they be worried about the timing of the market?
Timing of the market is, I urge people not to do that, right? You need to buy a home whenever it's the best time for you to buy a home. Yes. I think that's the main thing that goes into it, right? Obviously, the sooner that you can get into a house, the better, to start building that generational wealth so you're not throwing money away on rent, paying your landlord's mortgage, right? It's a huge thing, I'd say. And especially with what I was talking about now, how rates are now at the lowest that they've been in 3 years, which is huge. We were up at 8% basically for interest rates.
Yep.
Now we're basically right at 6%. Some options we can even get into the 5s. So whenever people say, I want to time the market, I mean, honestly, now is the time for the market. So, if you're on the fence and you're waiting and just thinking, now's not my right time for this, I urge you, give us a call or reach out and let's have a conversation. It all goes back to what we're talking about, right? Like, people end up staying on the fence so long because they're not starting early and they're not planning ahead. They're thinking that they need to just, hop in and buy it right now.
Well, and I feel like they feel intimidated. Like, I got to have $25,000 to buy a house.
No.
We can do 0 down, right? FHA, 3.5% down, VA, 0 down.
We have one going right now that we're closing the closing costs paid for by the seller, doing a VA loans, they're doing 0 down. And there was actually a little bit of money left over after the seller concessions. So with VA loans, you can actually put that towards paying off some of your credit cards.
Wow.
I don't know if you knew that on VA loans.
I didn't know that.
VA will allow you to pay off some of your other debts.
Wow.
On that. So really cool stuff that they offer. And so she's literally getting this house, not having to bring anything to the closing table and getting some of her credit cards paid down.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible?
That's insane. That's a nice little thing I did not know.
Yeah.
Now, guys, just don't sit on the fence. Call your lender, call an agent, get with them, talk with them. They will walk you through this process. If this year is your New Year's resolution to buy a home, now is the best time to do that. Get with David and I. You can reach Kelly and I at phillipsgrouptn.com, or you can reach David at.
Yeah, my cell number is 615-542-6659. Reach out to me, shoot me a text, give me a call. I'm happy to help.
David, appreciate you coming in.
Yeah.
Look forward to working with you this year, and it's going to be a great year for us, I know.
It's going to be a great year. See ya.
Bye.
For answers to all your real estate questions, ask Chris at the Phillips Group, Murfreesboro, Tennessee.